Okay, so this is the Talmud Daf Yomi. We're in Avodah Zarah Daf 61. So at the end of 60 it says, Rav Huna raised an objection to Rav Ashi from the Mishnah with regard to a case where a Gentile took the barrel of wine and threw it in his anger into the wine vat. This was an incident that occurred in Beit Sha'an, and the sages deemed the wine fit for drinking. One may infer that if the Gentile threw the wine in his anger, yes, it is permitted. But if it was not in his anger, the wine is not permitted. Now we're in 61. Rav Ashi replied, there the Mishnah is referring to a case where the barrel is not actually thrown, rather it is propelled by the Gentile and again propelled by him until it reaches the vat. Therefore, if the Gentile did so not in anger, there is reason to be concerned that he might have touched the wine. The Mishnah now says, in a case of a Jew who renders the wine of a Gentile permitted by treading the Gentile's grapes so that the wine can be sold to Jews, and although a Jew has not yet paid for the wine, he then places the wine in the Gentile's domain in a house that is open to a public thoroughfare until he sells it. The halacha depends on the circumstances. If this occurs in a city in which there are both Gentiles and Jews, the wine is permitted, as a Gentile does not touch the wine lest the Jews see him doing so. If this occurs in a city in which all the inhabitants are Gentiles, the wine is prohibited unless a Jew sits and safeguards. But the watchman is not required to sit and safeguard the wine constantly. Even if he frequently leaves the place and comes in again later, the wine is permitted. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says the domain of Gentiles is one, as the Gemara will explain. In the case of a Jew who renders the wine of a Gentile permitted by trading the Gentile's grapes so that the wine can be sold to Jews, and he then places the wine in the Gentile's domain until he sells it, the halacha depends on the circumstances. If that one, meaning the Gentile, writes for the Jew, I received money from you in payment for the wine, even though he did not receive the actual payment, the wine is permitted. So this is because the wine is considered the Jew's property and the Gentile does not venture to touch it. But if the Jew desires to remove the wine and the Gentile does not allow him to do so until the Jew gives him the money due to him, this was an incident that occurred in Beit Sha'an, and the sages deemed the wine prohibited. In this case, the Gentile believes that he has a lien upon the wine and therefore he has no compunctions about touching it. The Gemara questions the Mishnah's distinction between a city with Jewish inhabitants and a city without Jewish inhabitants. So the Gemara says, the wine should also be permitted in a city in which all its inhabitants are Gentiles, as aren't there Jewish peddlers who travel around the various towns? So consequently, the Gentile refrains from touching the wine lest the Jewish peddlers see him touching it. Shmuel says, the Mishnah is referring to a city that has double doors and a crossbar, and the residents know when outsiders enter the city. With regard to the Mishnah's statement that the wine is permitted only if the Gentile's house is open to a public thoroughfare, Rav Yosef says, and if the Jew's window is open to that place, it is considered like a public thoroughfare. And similarly, a trash heap is considered like a public thoroughfare, as many people frequent it. And a palm tree is considered like a public thoroughfare, as the Gentile is concerned lest someone climbing the palm tree see him. So with regard to a case where the top of the palm tree was cut off, Rav Acha and Ravina disagree. One of them deems the wine prohibited, and one of them deems it permitted. The Gemara explains, the one who deems the wine prohibited holds that since no fruit grows on the palm tree, why should someone climb up there? So the Gentile therefore has no reason for concern lest someone see him, and he has no compunctions about touching the wine. And the one who deems the wine permitted holds that it happens on occasion someone loses an animal and he climbs up the palm tree to look for it. The Gentile is therefore concerned lest someone climbing the palm tree see him, and he does not touch the wine. The sages taught, in a case of a Jew who purchases a house or one who rents a house in a Gentile's courtyard, and a Jew filled the house with barrels of wine, if another Jew dwells in the same courtyard, the wine is permitted. This halacha applies even if that Jew does not have in his possession the key to the house or a seal on the barrels of wine. So if a Jew dwells only in another courtyard, and the wine is also permitted, but this is only when the Jew has the key to the house or a seal of the barrels of wine in his possession, as this prevents the Gentile from gaining access to the wine. In the case of a Jew who renders the wine of a Gentile permitted, and the wine is in the Gentile's domain, if another Jew dwells in the same courtyard, the wine is permitted. But this is only when the Jew has the key to the house or a seal on the barrels of the wine in his possession. So Rabbi Yochanan said to the Tana, reciting the Braita, in this case, you should teach that even if that Jew does not have in his possession the key to the house or a seal on the barrels of wine, the wine is permitted. The Braita continues, if the second Jew dwells only in another courtyard, the wine is prohibited, even when that Jew has the key to the house or a seal on the barrels of wine in his possession. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis, meaning the majority, deem the wine prohibited unless a watchman is sitting and safeguarding the wine constantly, or unless an appointed person comes to safeguard the wine. This is referring to a watchman who comes at set times. So the Gemara asks, to which case in the Braita are the rabbis referring? If we say that they are referring to the last clause, this is difficult, as in that case, the first Tana, Rabbi Meir, also deems the wine prohibited. Rather, perhaps they are referring to the first clause of the last clause, with regard to a case where a Jew renders the Gentiles wine permitted and another Jew dwells in the same courtyard. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say to the Tana reciting the Braita, you should teach that even if the Jew does not have in his possession the key to the house or seal on the barrels of wine, the wine is permitted? It may be assumed that Rabbi Yochanan does not disagree with the opinion of the rabbis. Rather, the rabbis are referring to the last clause of the first clause, with regard to a Jew's wine that was placed in a house in a Gentile's courtyard, as the first Tana says. If a Jew dwells only in another courtyard, the wine is permitted. But this is only when the Jew has in his possession the key to the house or a seal on the barrels of wine. And the rabbis say, it is always prohibited unless a watchman is sitting and safeguarding the wine constantly, or unless an appointed person comes to safeguard the wine. This is referring to a watchman who comes at set times. The Gemara questions this ruling. If an appointed person comes at set times, it is detrimental, as the Gentile knows when to expect the watchman, and he may do as he pleases the rest of the time. Rather, amend the Braita and teach that the wine is prohibited unless an appointed person comes, and this is referring to a watchman who does not come at set times. Rather, he comes whenever he chooses to do so. So the Mishnah teaches that if a Jew renders the wine of a Gentile permitted and leaves the wine in the Gentile's domain, the wine is prohibited unless a Gentile guards the wine. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says the domain of the Gentiles is all one. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Does Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar come to be lenient or to be stringent? So Rav Yehuda says that Ze'eri says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar came to be lenient. So Rav Nachman says that Ze'eri says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar came to be stringent. The Gemara explains, Rav Yehuda says that Ze'eri says that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar came to be lenient, and accordingly, this is what the first Tana is saying. Just as the wine is prohibited when it is left in the Gentile owner's domain, so too the wine is prohibited when it is left in the domain of another Gentile, as the Ba'ali might allow the owner to touch the wine. And we are concerned that he might be in collusion with the Ba'ali will not reveal that the Gentile owner touched the wine, as the owner reciprocates on other occasions. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that not all the domains of Gentiles are considered as one. In what case is this statement that the wine is prohibited? This applies only when the wine is left in the Gentile owner's domain. But when is it left in the domain of another Gentile, the wine is permitted, as the Gentile refrains from touching the wine when it is in the domain of another Gentile, as his actions might become known. And we are not concerned that the two Gentiles might be in collusion. The Gemara explains the other opinion. Rav Nachman says that Ze'eri says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar came to be stringent, and accordingly, this is what the first Tana is saying. In what case is this statement that the wine is prohibited said? This applies only when the wine is left in the Gentile owner's domain, but when it is left in the domain of another Gentile, the wine is permitted, as the Gentile refrains from touching the wine when it is in the domain of another Gentile, and we are not concerned that the two Gentiles might be in collusion. Conversely, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says the domain of the Gentiles is all one, and the wine is prohibited, as it is possible that the Gentile Ba'ali is in collusion with the owner. It is taught in Braita in accordance with the opinion of Rav Nachman, who says that Ze'eri says that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar came to be stringent. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, the domain of the Gentiles is all one, but due to the swindlers. This indicates that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is presenting a more stringent opinion. The Gemara relates that the men of the house of Parzak, the Vizier, placed wine that had been rendered permitted by Jews who had not yet paid for it in the domain of their Gentile sharecroppers. The rabbis who were studying before Rava thought to say, when are we concerned that two Gentiles might be in collusion? This matter applies only in a case where this Gentile places items in the domain of that Gentile and vice versa. But here, since the Vizier's sharecroppers are not accustomed to place items in the house of Parzak the Vizier, we are not concerned that two Gentiles might be in collusion. Rava said to the rabbis, On the contrary, even according to one who says that we are not concerned that two Gentiles might be in collusion, that statement applies only where the other Gentile is not afraid of the wine's owner. But here, since the sharecropper is afraid of the Vizier, he covers up for him and testifies on his behalf that he did not touch the wine. So there was a certain city in which a Jew's wine was placed. A Gentile was found standing among the barrels of wine. Rava said, if the Gentile can be caught as a thief, if he touches the wine is permitted. Since he is afraid of being caught, he does not have the presence of mind to offer the wine as a libation. But if not, it is prohibited, even to derive benefit from the wine, as it assumed that the Gentile certainly touched it and offered it as a libation. So Hadran Alach, Rabbi Yishmael.